When my sister told me her wedding date, I thought she was joking. She smiled across the dinner table, the candlelight catching the gold in her hair, and said, "It's the same day as yours." Our parents laughed first, like it was clever, not cruel. They called it fate, said it would be beautiful. 2 daughters, 2 weddings, 1 celebration, and I smiled too, because I'd learned how to smile when I was supposed to. But the sound of her laughter stayed with me long after the table cleared. It had that tone, the one she used when she'd already won. They thought I didn't mind. They thought I'd fold like always. But that night, for the first time in my life, I decided to stay unfolded. Growing up with Sienna was like sharing a mirror that only reflected her. She was the golden child, the one people turned to look at. She had mom's smile, dad's confidence, and my share of attention. When she won, they called it talent. When I won, they called it luck. And when we both lost, somehow it was my fault. I remember being 8 years old, standing on our front steps while mom adjusted Sienna's dress for a photo shoot. Her voice soft, warm, "Smile bigger, honey." Behind them, I held a lunchbox I'd packed myself, waiting for someone to notice. No one did. Later at school, I worked harder than anyone. Grades became my way of existing, proof that I mattered, if only on paper. But even then, Dad would say, "Don't brag, Bonnie. You'll make your sister feel bad." So I stopped showing them. I folded every test neatly into a drawer, my own little archive of invisible effort, and over time, that became a habit. I folded my happiness, my words, my wants, until one day, there wasn't much left to fold. When I was 13, Mom ordered a birthday cake that said, "Happy birthday, Sienna and Bonnie." She said it'd be fun to celebrate together. Sienna blew out every candle before I touched one. I remember clapping. I remember smiling so wide my cheeks ached. And I remember feeling something deep inside me curl tight like a thread pulled hard but not yet snapped. That was the first time I realized I wasn't quiet because I didn't have things to say. I was quiet because no one listened. Years later, nothing had changed. When Sienna failed a class in college, Mom said the professor must have had it out for her. When I graduated with honors, they said, "Well, you were always the practical one." No pride, no warmth, just expectation. I got a job right after graduation. They barely noticed. But when Sienna announced her engagement, Mom cried for hours. I remember standing in the corner that night, holding my glass of water while the room buzzed around her. People kept saying, "She's finally getting her fairy tale." No one ever wondered what mine looked like. When I met Liam, it was nothing cinematic. He was quiet too, thoughtful, steady, the kind of man who listens. He never asked me to be less. He didn't fill silence with noise. He made space for it. When he proposed, he didn't do it in front of a crowd. He asked me on a park bench, his voice trembling just enough to sound real. I said yes. It was supposed to be the one thing that was mine, until that dinner. Until Sienna smiled and said, "It's the same day as yours." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the circled date in my planner. It was just ink on paper, but it meant years of waiting for something to finally belong to me. Now she'd taken that too. My phone buzzed. "Mom, sweetheart," she said. "Since Sienna's wedding will be bigger, maybe you could shift yours a little later?" Same day, just different time. "You'll understand," I said, "of course, Mom," because that's what I always said. But when the call ended, I wrote 2 words under that circled date in my planner: "Do not move." The next morning, I woke early. The city outside my window was quiet, rain blurring the skyline. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into work. I'd been there 9 years, long enough to know how to make things happen quietly. I drafted an internal memo, formal attendance requested for the Reed Carter wedding. I didn't send it, not yet, just saved it, the cursor blinking like a silent heartbeat. By noon, I'd already made a few calls, booked the grand ballroom, upgraded the menu, confirmed the guest list. No one noticed. No one ever does until it's too late. That week, Sienna called. Her tone was bright, almost too bright. She said she was so excited, that she hoped I wasn't mad, that she didn't think it mattered. I listened, said all the right words, hung up. Then I called the venue again and asked to double our lighting budget. If we were sharing a date, I'd make sure my silence came with spotlights. Days blurred into lists, guests, seating, menus, invoices. Each click of my pen was a promise, each note a quiet step closer to balance. Liam helped me every night. He didn't ask why I needed things perfect. He just said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And that became our rhythm, him measuring the decorations, me lining up the details like a general preparing for war, not loud, not cruel, just exact. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and bright. The city was still, as if the world itself was waiting for something to unfold. My dress was simple, ivory silk, no glitter, no noise. When I slipped it on, it felt like armor. T the hotel. There were 2 signs at the entrance. Ballroom, a Reed Carter wedding. Ballroom B, Sienna and Noah. 2 halls. 1 building. 1 date. I arrived early. Guests followed. Executives, board members, colleagues, all invited under one name. Ours. I'd made sure of that. By noon. Our ballroom was full, the air thick with laughter and gold light. Across the hall, Sienna's was nearly empty. Her fiancé was already making calls, his voice rising with every unanswered number. When I walked down the aisle, I could see her through the glass doors, her expression breaking like porcelain. The music swelled, and for once, I didn't look away. I said I do under a chandelier that rained light across the floor. Applause filled the room, soft, elegant, complete. Then the doors opened. Sienna stepped in, tears streaked down her face. You stole my guests, she hissed. You ruined everything. The room went silent, and for a second, all I heard was the echo of my own heartbeat. Then Liam's father, Mr. Carter, stood from the front row, his voice calm, commanding. This, he said, is the only Reed Carter wedding today. Her face drained of color. Noah turned toward her, confusion twisting into anger. You said this was your date. Sienna's voice cracked. It was supposed to be, but he'd already stepped back. Security didn't have to drag them. They just left. Because sometimes silence doesn't need force, it only needs truth. When the doors closed, the quartet began to play again. Slow, graceful, a sound that filled every space she used to occupy. I raised my glass slightly, just enough to catch my reflection in the wine. For years, I'd used silence to survive. That night, I used it to reclaim. They thought I stayed quiet because I was weak. But silence is sharper than anger. It cuts cleaner. The next morning, the city looked softer. Streets damp with rain, sunlight glinting off rooftops. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, stirring sugar into my coffee. Liam still asleep, his breathing steady. My planner lay closed on the table beside our marriage certificate. The seal caught the morning light. The ink on that date was dry, smooth, final. For years, I'd folded everything I ever earned, my voice, my proof, my pride. But yesterday, I unfolded them all. I didn't destroy her. I just stopped making myself smaller. And maybe that's what real revenge looks like, not shouting, not chaos, just standing tall in a space someone tried to shrink you out of. Later that day, Mom called. Her voice sounded tired. Your sister's devastated, she said. She thinks you embarrassed her. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just said, maybe now she understands how it feels to be invisible. She didn't reply. And for the first time, her silence didn't hurt. It healed. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like quiet stars. All my life, I thought silence was emptiness, a punishment, a space where I disappeared. But now I know it's something else. It's power. It's boundaries settling into place. It's justice, soft-spoken, deliberate, earned. Sienna will wake up every day knowing she planned her downfall with her own hands. That's the beauty of silence. It never raises its voice. It just lets the echoes do the work. So if you're still listening, remember this. Not all revenge burns. Some freezes, some waits, and some looks like peace. I didn't need to ruin her. I just needed to remind her that quiet doesn't mean defeated. It means done. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Nilla Voices, where silence speaks louder than rage, and every calm ending hides a storm that finally learned how to rest.